Thank you, Eric. It's good to be with everyone. I'm just going to get warmed up here with some audience participation. How many here do not live in New Hampshire, if you could raise your hand? Well, it's about half the audience. That's good. How many people here own some form of digital asset, cryptocurrency? All right. All right. Keep your hands up. And I'm going to ask you the year that you bought your first digital asset. Okay, so keep your hands up if you bought your first digital asset before the year, let's say 2023. If you don't, well, nobody put their hand down. All right, 2021. All right, 2019. 2017, I can subtract by 2. Wow, 2015. 2013, wow, 2011, and I guess that's about it. So that was everybody. Okay, so we got some OGs in the room. That's pretty cool. So as a way of introduction, my name is Keith Ammon, as Eric said. Moved to the Free State Project, for the Free State Project in 2009. It took us about 5 years. It took me 5 years to convince my wife, Susan, that it was a good idea. I think so far she's on board. That was 15 or 16 years ago. I first learned about, my path to learning about Bitcoin was through this very conference, which is kind of weird. So it was in Nashua at the Crown Plaza. And who remembers the Alt Expo?
They'll be back tomorrow.
Will they? Okay.
Yeah, they'll be here.
So for those that don't know, the Alt Expo, it's a group, I call them anarchists. They're a group of people that don't like rules, and they think that this is too structured, too corporate, whatever they want to call it. So they would rent a room. It was in a hotel. It was in the Crown Plaza in Nashua. They rented a room on the 3rd floor, and they called it the Alt Expo. It was just a little room. There was only like half a dozen people ever in there, I think. They had beer in the bathtub. They had a slide projector on the wall. And so I wandered into this room, and they were talking about something called RipplePay, which is, it's even before blockchain. RipplePay was the precursor to Ripple now, but it was this series of IOUs that were passed back and forth through nodes. It wasn't anything like a blockchain. I think maybe it had some cryptography involved, and I just thought I could scam this. I could just make a bunch of accounts and borrow from people and never pay them back, right? That's pretty easy. So I kept up the conversation with that group in that room. There's Darren Tapp, if anybody of you know Darren Tapp, he was one of them people. And so a few months later, this is early 2021, the conversation shifted to Bitcoin. And I have a computer programming background. I knew a little bit about big abstract systems, and it just clicked for me. I thought that was the most amazing thing. So I've been fixated on that ever since 2011. I got elected to the legislature in 2015, and that was still very early in this camp. And so myself and a few others, we would start talking about Bitcoin in the legislature. And you have to understand, the New Hampshire legislature, the average age is something like 65, 66, right? So it's like a miracle that they can even work email, to be honest with you. Like, sorry everybody, but that's sort of the case back then. So trying to explain Bitcoin to them was way over the top, right? They would call it beanie babies, they'd call it all kinds of, fad, they'd call all the things, because nobody really understood it back then. So fast forward a couple of years, back in 2017, we were one of the first states to pass legislation exempting virtual currencies, that's what they call it in the law, from state money transmitter laws. So if you transmit money, you got to register your business so the state knows what you're doing, so they can shut you down if they don't like it. But we were able to convince, actually backing up a little bit, the governor at the time, Democratic Governor Maggie Hassan, she created a commission to study cryptocurrency. So sort of out of that was this exemption for the money transmitter law. I was a co-sponsor on that bill. We got a nice signing ceremony with the governor. There's a picture of the governor holding up a chart or a banner with the Bitcoin logo on it back in 2017. So that's kind of a cool little piece of memorabilia. We were in his office. We put the text of that bill onto the Bitcoin blockchain using something called proof of existence. So I set it up where PDF of the bill had it ready to go so the governor could just push the button. But we put the hash of the state PDF, so it's a particular state file is on the Bitcoin. You can actually go and look it up if you know to download the PDF, put it into proof of existence, you'll see that transaction. So that happened in the governor's office, which is kind of cool. All right, and so fast forward, Wyoming, some other states, they kind of got ahead of us. We had that money transmitter exemption was a really early win, and then it kind of fizzled out, it kind of stalled, right? Wyoming especially got ahead of us. Some other states like Texas, some of the real authoritarian states actually I think have gotten somewhat behind us, you know, like New York put a moratorium on Bitcoin mining across the whole state. They created something called the BIT license, which was a very draconian early license that people had to jump through. So I think that opens up some opportunities for us. So later on, we added an exemption from our securities laws for a utility token. So if you have a token, it's got like a consumable purpose, that also is exempt from securities laws. And then in 2022, Governor Sununu, actually this is the real story. I put in a bunch of crypto bills, and it kind of freaked out the banking department and some of the other regulators. So somebody got to the governor and said, hey, the House is moving with all these crypto bills. So he signed an executive order, created a crypto commission. That was in 2022. And I had the pleasure of serving on that. I was the only House member to serve on that. And that was interesting. It was a conference room once a month. We had the Attorney General's office, the banking commissioner or her deputy, the securities division, the Bankers Association, Credit Union Association, a lot of like industry groups and regulators in a room for the first time. And I kind of got to see them, the light bulbs slowly got brighter and brighter over their heads as they learned more about what we were talking about. You know, like in the beginning, it was kind of blockchain Bitcoin 101. And you know, isn't this used for criminals and isn't this used for terrorists, right? Like, so it was great to be part of that discussion, and I made some relationships based on that group. So some of the, actually before the commission issued its final report, I put in a bill that created something called, I'm gonna say the UCC, right? There's some people misunderstand what UCC is and they think it's a bad thing. You know, it can be a bad thing, but it's basically to facilitate interstate commerce. So it's a group that sits down and they try to figure out how to make uniform laws so that when a company registers in one state, they don't have to keep you know, working through all these different hoops, 50 different hoops, that it's sort of uniform, right? They came out with the Article 12 amendment. So they called digital assets, they called something called controllable electronic records. So I put in almost a final draft and got it passed. And we made one tweak. This is kind of under the radar in New Hampshire. There was, in the definition of money, it allowed for central bank digital currencies. And so I got to, in committee, because it came through the committee that I was on, and I worked with someone who was on the drafting committee. His name is Chuck Mooney. He moves to Amherst. He's a University of Penn professor, moved to Amherst. He actually helped write the first draft. So I worked with him on this amendment to exclude central bank digital currencies from the definition of money. So that way, you kind of have to know where to find it. You know, it doesn't ban it outright. I don't think we could get that through the legislature, at this point at least. But it doesn't include it in the definition of money. So that was one thing that we changed that uniform definition to be. One of the major recommendations from the Governor's Crypto Commission was this concept of what is New Hampshire's comparative advantage in the crypto space, right? So if you go to Texas, they have tons of energy in the ground, so they can mine Bitcoin. They're putting Bitcoin mining on their energy grid, so they call it a large flexible load, right? They ramp it up, they ramp it down depending on the current price of energy. But we don't have that, we have high energy prices. But New Hampshire has, we're a nimble small state and we've had a lot of firsts. So New Hampshire has had the first state lottery. New Hampshire has had the first credit union, so St. Mary's in in New Hampshire is the very first credit union. And there's some other firsts that are escaping me, but those are two big ones. And we are one of the first states to revamp our trust laws in the early aughts. So we have one of the best trust law frameworks in the country, and it's made to interface with international jurisdictions. You know, some jurisdictions are common law, some are based on other systems, right? So it's made to interface with all those systems. And so out of the governor's commission, we decided we need to be nimble in the regulatory space. And one of the main recommendations was creating a framework for decentralized autonomous organizations. So we got that bill passed last year. The Secretary of State, it's very permissive. So I know I'm going off topic here. I'm going to get to the topic in a minute. I'm just really proud of all this little bit of baby steps, right? 3 minutes.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Anyway, I'll skip over the DAO stuff, but I'm working with the Secretary of State's office to set up this registry. And the registry basically says, show us what you're doing, keep your information current, pay $100 or $200, whatever it is a year, and we're going to try to do it in a stable token, so it's blockchain native. And you get to operate a DAO, and it creates a whole new corporate entity type. So it's not like an LLC, it's a whole new thing. So that'll be interesting to see how that evolves. All right, so let's get to this year. I put in 3 blockchain bills this year, and 302 is the one in the title of the talk. That's House Bill 302. And the marketing name for it is the Strategic Reserve Bill. So I'll just give you a little background. The treasurer is tasked with handling all of the money for the state. So our state treasurer, Monica Mazzapelli is her name. She gets elected by the state legislature. So we actually elect her. And she has a list of investments that she's allowed to invest in statute. And that list, all the things are super safe, and none of them beat inflation. They all like, you're gonna lose money on that whole basket of things. So I worked with, if you're familiar with the Satoshi Action Fund, does anybody know who Satoshi Action Fund is? So they have model legislation for the strategic reserve. We started with that. And you'll see other states are trying to implement the same thing. Texas, Utah, Kansas, there's a few others. But so our version of the bill, it allows the treasurer, it expands that list that I just mentioned, and it allows them to invest in digital assets with a minimum market cap. So we're not talking about meme coins. And it also allows them to invest in precious metals, so gold and silver. So sound money type of instruments, right? And it limits it to 5% of state funds, which I think is still very high. I think BlackRock recommends a 2% allocation into something like Bitcoin. So 5% it's a good starting point. And so we met with the treasurer to develop the final version of the bill. We amended it. It had to come through 2 committees in the State House. So it came through Commerce. We amended it there. We simplified it a little bit. And then it went through Ways and Means. And then it went to the Senate. And so this past Wednesday, just 2 days ago, it came through the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And it came out of committee 4-1, ought to pass, OTP. Ought to pass is the recommendation to the floor. So it's pretty much guaranteed that the Senate's going to pass it. And we think the governor will sign it. And the treasurer is mildly excited about it, because when we talked to her, she said her colleagues around the country are discussing digital assets and what to do with it. So here's my thinking on that. New Hampshire, we need to build up New Hampshire's sovereignty, right? So that's the main issue. So, and I think currency, defense, energy, those types of things, we need to start planting seeds now so that it grows the state sovereignty, right? That gives us more leverage in a federal system. So that's one of the reasons I focus on this stuff. Getting our regulators and our legislator up to speed, able to talk about this stuff intelligently, and putting New Hampshire on the map as a forward-moving state in this new crypto industry. I mean, I think it's going to be the financial underpinnings of the entire globe, and we want to get in on it early, and we want to have a friendly jurisdiction. So that's my thinking on pushing this stuff. It would be wonderful if we could wave a wand and government disappeared and we didn't need it, but that's not going to happen. It's not the way the world works. So I'll stop there, and I'll ask if you guys have any questions. I could keep going, but I know my time is up.
We can take one question.
Sir.
Hi. You just said that this bill about the strategic reserve is likely to pass. Is it, and that they could invest up to 5%?
Yeah, it's
what is the
enabling.
minimum that they could
Minimum
invest?
is
Could they,
zero, which is what it is today, yeah.
so they could choose to
Yeah.
ignore the bill, essentially do nothing with it, and so,
They could, so this is, so you got to move in are you familiar with the term salami slicing? The Chinese communists use this term, and I use it here. You got to take little steps, but you got to be, it's relentless incrementalism, right? So this is another step in incrementalism.
Okay.
And that's how I look at it.
All right, thanks.
All right, good to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.